There we go. Okay. Good thing I didn't forget that. All right. Well, welcome to this free workshop, Breathwork for Integration. This is the first part of a four-part series on the portals and pathways courses that are going to be offered this year within the Blue Magic Alchemy Skool community. So just as a brief overview, what you can expect, we'll be going over the Breathwork for Integration info first, and also a little bit about the larger kind of curriculum that's going to be offered next year. We'll have a few minutes, as long as I stay on topic, for Q&A, and a couple minutes just to, if you need to freshen up, grab a drink, get ready for breath work, go to the bathroom, things like that. And then we'll have about a 30-minute breathwork practice to close out the workshop. So this will be a good example of what you can expect within the community in general and in the course more specifically. So for those of you that are not as familiar with me, my name is Jonathan Schechter. I'm a breathwork facilitator. I'm trained and certified in neurodynamic breathwork as well as oxygen advantage, and very, very close to finishing up the Grof transpersonal training, which is more commonly known as holotropic breathwork. I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner and an integration coach. I've been in private practice for the last few years, as well as working at a facility called Cottonwood to Tucson, although I just recently left that position as an integrative specialist. But I did breath work, somatic work, somatic experiencing, and meditation work with folks there in residential treatment for about 3 years. I'm also a mindfulness meditation teacher and the host of the Vital Point podcast, which you might be familiar with. And if you're not, that's a great place just to get more introduced to the work that I do, the things that we, really focus on in the community, which is more of a grounded approach to spirituality and working in psychedelic states. So a little bit more about that. Blue Magic Alchemy is that community. We really focus on integration, not just having the experiences, but how are we integrating them? Like, how is that impacting our life? How are the changes or the experiences that I'm having rippling out into other areas of my life, whether that be my career, my relationships, my friends, what I feel like is my purpose and where I want to put my energy, as far as, what I want to get out of life, what I want to experience. And we offer guided breathwork and meditation that's both live and recorded, as well as workshops like this and courses for personal growth work that are psychedelic friendly. I always struggle a little bit with this because not everyone is working with psychedelics, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But whether you feel like doing that or not, you'll find, courses that can support your journey and your growth. And really what I'm about personally, and one of my missions with this community and with the clients that I work with, is providing a structured path for transformation. So there's so much information that's out there. There's so many different choices. There's so many different people that are offering, different modalities and courses and methods. I know when I started out on my own journey about 6 or 7 years ago, it was overwhelming trying to find, like, where do you start? And, sort of signing up for someone's free course, mini course, and then, doing that and getting to a dead end, and then, finding another book or another course and moving from place to place. So really what my goal is to provide a structured path in a community where we can all traverse together. So, as a way to begin, I thought just a little mini practice. Uh, and this is, will be kind of moving from the external and orienting inward. So, if it feels right, you could close your eyes. And if it's not comfortable to do that, or if you're driving, you're not going to be safe, feel free to leave them open. Just start to bring that awareness of where you are in time and space. Maybe noticing, being aware of the city that you're in right now, the area, the neighborhood, and into the house or the space where you're connecting to this, and into the room. And even with your eyes closed, bringing your awareness into this room, what do you notice? There might be sounds, temperature in the room. Maybe there's something that you smell or taste. Just allow yourself to notice the sensations and the things that are present in your environment. You don't have to change, you don't have to push things away or chase after pleasurable sensations. It's just about noticing. And then let's continue to bring that awareness even more inward, just noticing where you feel support in your body. Most likely you're sitting on something. So you might feel your feet on the ground or the connection between yourself and the surface below you. Perhaps noticing the way that your clothes feel on your body. And bringing that awareness now to your breath if it hasn't already landed there. Just feeling that flow of air coming in and out of the body. And where you notice it, what's happening as you bring that awareness to your breath. You might notice the oxygen coming through the nose, the throat, maybe the rise and fall of the chest and the lungs. Maybe even more subtle sensations like the gentle rise of the shoulders or the expansion in the chest. You might even notice that as you bring your awareness to your breath, the breath begins to subtly change, maybe getting a little bit slower or deeper. You might notice how that might bring a little bit more calm or ease to your experience. Now, going even further inward, can you turn that awareness onto awareness itself? Just notice who is aware, who's noticing you breathing, who's noticing the thoughts and the sensations. Simply resting that awareness on awareness itself. And if you're watching the replay of this, I invite you to pause for as long as you feel right, as long as you'd like to stay with this awareness. For those of you that are here with me live, just coming back, opening the eyes whenever you feel ready. Maybe just noticing how that helped to shift or settle or just change the experience since we started. So, breathwork for integration is a course that I've offered in several different iterations. I've done it several times as a group. I've also taught it one on one to private clients, and it's really a distillation, if you will, of the work that I've done over the past few years. But specifically, we're working with a framework for using breathwork for nervous system resilience as preparation and integration for expanded states of consciousness. That might be psychedelics, that might be Kundalini practice, that might be meditation. There's a big sort of pot that covers, and I'll go into that a little bit more here. And also as a complete vehicle for accessing these expanded states. So for some of my clients, they're using breath work to help, prepare or integrate their psychedelic work or work in other expanded states. And for others, the breath work itself is the psychedelic experience. So the way that I like to describe my work is these three buckets of awareness. We touched into that a little bit just now. The nervous system regulation, which you may have noticed a little bit of a nervous system change just going through our orientation exercise, and then breath work for transformation itself. Another way that I like to describe it is through these sort of symbols here. We start with just awareness itself on the left, just this, kind of blank canvas. And then for nervous system, we usually start with how can we regulate the nervous system downward? How can we be more in that rest and digest system? How do we learn how to do that? And there's all kinds of benefits to that, whether that's feeling more presence, feeling calmer, feeling more relaxed, better sleep, all kinds of benefits that come with that. And then we start to work with the nervous system in the other way, like this up regulation, this expansion. And if we kind of keep expanding, we keep moving outward, eventually we move into a full on expanded state of consciousness where the breath can be used for transformation and healing all on its own. So these are all things that we're covering in this upcoming course. And the framework for this is really this idea that started to um, kind of come to me earlier this year about pathways and portals. Um, this is my own, kind of belief and what I've experienced myself in my own psychedelic journey is that too often we are focusing on what I would call the portal experiences, these big macro psychedelic experiences, whether you're sitting with, ayahuasca multiple nights or, taking 5 grams of mushrooms or, 5-MeO DMT, these big experiences that are like jumping through a portal. And maybe we're not putting enough emphasis on the path, on having practices that help us stay grounded, that help us um, integrate and understand and be able to sit with and process these bigger portal experiences that we're having. And the irony is that when we practice uh, the path, whether that's meditation, whether that's somatic practices, even breathwork itself, all of those disciplines, all of those slow, incremental path practices can open up to portals in and of itself. Some of my most profound and life-changing psychedelic experiences have been with breathwork and have been with lower doses of medicine than I used to work with before I really dedicated myself to more somatic work. So, in other words, instead of having sort of this randomness of these huge portal experiences that were blowing out my nervous system and that might, be like a Pandora's box that could open up things that it might take me months or even years to really like process, to understand, to try to figure out, by lowering the dose but having more presence, having more mindfulness, having more somatic awareness and embodiment. When I went into those experiences, I found that I got a lot more out of the psychedelics themselves. So when I do decide to, have these intentional portal experiences, I'm getting a lot more out of it by having more preparation and integration. So, if that isn't a good enough pitch for why focus on the path, these are all things that clients have said to me over the last 5 or 6 years, specifically in regards to like working with the portal experiences. We're working with big psychedelics. I mean, initially, when I started out doing this work, I marketed myself just as a psychedelic integration coach and doing market research and coming to people and saying, why do you want to work with with psychedelic integration? These are all things that I heard. So, straight from the mouth of clients and people that I, interviewed, when they were like, hey, I need help integrating these experiences. So anything from like, um, I feel stuck, or I don't know how to start, to like, well, I already started and now I feel like I'm in over my head, or even things that I experienced myself where it felt like I'd have these big giant breakthroughs. And then a month later, after the afterglow kind of wore off, it would feel like I was right back where I started. So if any of these, feel familiar or that you can relate to, it might be a good reason to contemplate taking this slower pathway approach and integrating that into the bigger picture for yourself. So again, to come back to this framework of awareness, nervous system regulation, and transformation, we really begin by observing what in somatic work we call coupling. But the coupling between our sensations and our emotions and the meaning that we experience. So a really simple example of coupling is if you've ever walked into a dark room and seen something that wasn't real. Like the real classic example is like you see a rope and it looks like a snake. And what happens in your body when you think it's a snake, right? You might get startled, you might start to get anxious or feel afraid for a moment until the light turns on. You see it was just a rope and you didn't have anything to be afraid of in the first place. But that somatic experience where that you get startled, there might be fear, the heart starts to race. That's what we call coupling. And so with somatic work, we start to really be able to tune in to how this is going on all the time based on our past experiences, maybe based on the way that we grew up or our environment, past traumas. Like a really, really easy example of this that I usually, bring up at this point is like if, people that have had car accidents, it's very, very common after a car accident, especially if it's like a really bad one, to not want to drive. You might start to feel like really nervous about getting in back into a car. Some people don't drive for a while after that. Other people, like, I've done this, have gone out and bought a bigger, SUV because they feel like, oh, that's going to keep them safer, right? So again, these are all what we would call coupling dynamics. So the really easy example or the explanation is that there's a sensation or an emotion, and then there's a meaning that's attached to that. So the more that we practice meditation and breath work, we can separate the meaning that we're experiencing from the sensation or the emotion, and realize, oh, hey, maybe there's something else that's going on here. Maybe this means something else, right? So that's one really big thing that we'll kind of touch into in these courses. And then simply another one is just practicing resources to regulate and be more resilient to our experiences. And finally, to transform and heal by accessing expanded states through the breath or through other means. So really, my thesis on this is that the pathways support the work with portals. That's not an either or. Although most people, I think, are focusing just on the portals and then wondering why they're not getting any, permanent changes or the things that they want out of their portal work. But when we combine both together, we have this grounded, disciplined approach of the pathways. It can support the work that you're doing with portals. And look, I'm not here to tell you this is the way or this is the only way. This course and these courses over the next year are really about you discovering your own pathway, the practices that you're going to be able to continue to do that are going to support you and your growth and your best life. I can give you some best practices. I can tell you what's worked for me and the things that I've studied and that I've been trained in. But ultimately, this is really a personal journey of going within. And I think by learning together and by having the group experience, it really enriches that. Recently I was on a retreat, and one of the things that we did during that retreat was we went around the grounds of the retreat space, and we each created sacred space, what you might call an altar, right? But it doesn't have to be an altar. And then we all, like, each one of us visited each other's sacred spaces and shared about like why we chose that particular place and like what we put into that sacred space. And it was such a beautiful expression of like seeing like how other people see the world, getting like this window into like what they considered important or sacred to them. And sometimes like even into the rituals or the things that help them come into this space of presence and stillness. Like one person had like did a little tea ceremony. They traveled all over the world, but they traveled with this little like travel tea kit. And so they like had, hot water there and like handed out tea to everyone. Other people like had more, kind of meditative spaces or like, this particular place on the land that they would go to meditate. Um, so it's this really beautiful example of like how we can enrich our own experience by like listening and sharing our sacredness and our practices with others. So I'm going to kind of skip to the end instead of starting, we started with awareness. Now let's talk about like the holotropic or the transformational. So where I come from, and I considered lineage and the things that I've practiced, my teachers, my guides, really important to me. And one of the most influential ones as far as breath work and working with psychedelics and psychedelic integration is Stanislav Grof. Um, even if you're not um, familiar with Grof, you probably are because his work is all over the current psychedelic renaissance. The MAPS training, for instance, that's doing FDA testing for psilocybin and MDMA, they are all going off the protocols and the work of Grof. And the amazing thing, if this is new to you, is that even though Grof started working with LSD in the 60s, he also created holotropic breathwork, this breathwork that is just as powerful as a psychedelic experience. So I love this quote from Grof. In every mystical wisdom tradition, non-ordinary states of consciousness have served as essential tools for discovering why we're here and how we can live richer, more meaningful lives. And this is really like a compass point that I use in my work. Grof being one of the fathers of transpersonal psychology. And I've always found it really interesting that in Chinese and Hebrew and Greek and in Sanskrit, for very ancient cultures and traditions, the word for breath and the word for spirit is the same in each of those languages. So there's this real strong connection between this mystical aspect of life and the breath, and the breath as this doorway, this portal, if you will, into non-ordinary states of consciousness. Now, if you're not familiar with Grof's work, I mean, I could do a whole workshop just on that. But when you talk about holotropic, holotropic means moving towards wholeness, just the same way that a plant moves towards the sunlight. And Grof's work is based on this idea that when we access expanded states of consciousness, whether that's near death experiences, whether that's psychedelics, whether that's breath work or meditation, that it accelerates this natural movement towards wholeness that is always happening. And what is keeping us from being whole? The unconscious, the subconscious, and the biographical um, and perinatal, the things that happen during our birth, and transpersonal traumas that we may have experienced, right? So things that happened in our life, things that happened during our birth, and maybe even things that happened outside of this particular life or that are happening in the collective, in our culture, in our society, that these are all things that we can experience and move through to move towards wholeness. And that this process is happening all the time. It's just expanded state work accelerates that. Psychedelics, according to Grof, are called non-ordinary, or I'm sorry, non-specific amplifier. So um, one principle of this work is trusting the process, that healing is coming from within. It's not about a shaman. It's not even really about the medicine that you're working with, but how that is interfacing with what's happening within, what he called the inner healer or an inner guiding intelligence. And that this trust doesn't come from the mind. In fact, the mind is what usually is blocking us and keeping us grounded in, normal consciousness, which we need, right? Like, um, I, you know, I don't know about you. I wouldn't want to try to drive a car or do my taxes or go to the grocery store in the state that I'm in when I take 5 grams of mushrooms. That would not be a very fun experience. So yeah, we do need, sort of this regular consciousness to get around in the world, to go to work every day. But that also there's this holotropic experience that we can tap into really at any time. Um, so moving through that, moving into an expanded state so that we can get beyond the mind and we can access the wisdom that the body already has. And a great example of this is, when I get a cut on my finger, I don't have to tell my body how to heal it. My body knows how to do that without me actively getting involved. And so, in the same way, when I can get out of the way of my mind and my ego, my subconscious knows how to move towards this wholeness. Um, Another one is that the way past is through. So that we're really we want to embrace the experiences that we're having. That bypassing isn't going to get it done, that the things that we resist are going to continue to persist. So within this model, with whatever arises, we try to let it be there and be as big as it wants to be. And this is another reason why the somatic work is so important, is it's increasing our capacity for what feels okay to be with, right? So this can be a practice. It's not just about um, sort of overwhelming or overloading the system, which can happen in a strict portal experience. When people say, "Oh, I had 5 years of therapy in one ayahuasca ceremony," like that takes a while to integrate. There's a reason that maybe it's taking 5 years to process, and that can be like that's not the ideal circumstance for everyone in their nervous system. We avoid judgment. Whatever is coming up, let it be there. What happens if I, just allow it and give myself permission to experience rather than trying to avoid the bad and staying with the good? So I already said this one, but whatever you resist persists, right? And this is something I found, that the difficult experiences that I've had many times are the ones that lead to the most personal growth. So, you know, this type of work is not just about, love and light or bypassing your experiences. It's about like this grounded presence with all of it, because all of it is a part of it, right? We can't just pick and choose. Well, I like this, but I'm just going to try to avoid these parts of my life or my experience that I don't really like. Usually we just end up kind of stuck. So emotions signals that something needs to be recognized. And I think I've already been kind of weaving this in, but walking the mystical path with your feet on the ground. The integration is more important than the experience. Um, I spent a lot of time, even before I really got interested or knew what integration was or started doing these trainings. Um, I had a lot of psychedelic experiences. Some of them were really fun. But they didn't really do anything to change my my life. They were just kind of experiences that I'd have, and every once in a while I'd have another one, and it would be kind of cool, and then it would fade. So really, the integration was what started to change my experience from just having the random experiences that might go this way, they might go that way, depending on where I was and who I was with, and how I was feeling that day. It might go in a completely different direction than what I was hoping for. But integration started to change that for me. And I think it also creates this radical self-empowerment. One of the things that I'd like to do um, during this breathwork for integration course is introduce a little bit of this book called The Power Within by Tab Sparks. This is one of the books that I read during my initial breathwork training. And it's really about this becoming and embracing that the inner healer and this move towards wholeness as this radical self-empowerment. It's like, hey, no one's coming to save you, but you get to save yourself. That's a pretty cool thing that has completely changed the way that I see life. And being open to the mystery. Like, this isn't just about meditation or just about discipline. It's being open to the fact that there's some really cool transpersonal mysterious stuff that's happening all around us, and by traversing this path, we can start to bring more of that in to our lives. The sacred is all around us. It's just about being open and being aware and conscious of it. Um, the other night, it was really nice. We were going out for a walk, and like around dusk, and there was an owl in a tree. And there's a few owls that are around my house, but it immediately brought up this experience I just had at this retreat, where one of the participants was sharing about um he shared something that was really tragic, actually. But that in the wake of this tragedy, there was this family of owls that had started to come to his property and come back like repeatedly over the years, and that he really felt that the owls were like almost like a spirit animal, or like a sign of this particular tragedy, like the silver lining, if you will, or like the bigger meaning of this tragic event. And immediately when I saw this owl, like, I kind of dropped into that space as well. So whenever people have shared things like that with me, like their synchronicities or like their mystery magical moments, it enriches me in my own life. And I think that that's really cool personally. So again, like coming and experiencing something in a group where we can share that together. Um, and these practices support your growth whether you decide to work with psychedelics or not. So again, pathways supporting your work with portals. Um, there's a few metaphors I like to use in terms of integration. You can see more through a clean window. More clarity, the more awareness, the more insight. When we have increased nervous system capacity and we're not in survival mode, we can experience more. Like, that's just science. When we're in survival mode, we're kind of, or we lose our peripheral vision. We're really focused on what's in front of us and the immediate danger and surviving that. And that's also uh, that also is applies to our emotions. Like there's emotions and things that we're not experiencing when we're in survival mode. Um, and so, you know, change is not happening by itself, even if you're working with these non-specific amplifiers like psychedelics. They're not going to do the work for you. They're going to kind of shine a light on those places where you need to do the work, and maybe hopefully give you some, some ideas, some inspiration for how to make those changes. But you still have to walk through that door yourself. The breath really is the most effective resource for shifting the autonomic state. And the goal, I think, with this, when we're talking about, autonomic nervous system and nervous system resilience, is to get better at surfing, right? I love the saying, like, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. So how do we get better at that? Because trauma is not just what happened, it's how we experienced it. And that might be, what we think of as like sort of conventional or shock trauma when things are happening too much, too soon, too fast. It can also be too little, too late, too slow, the things that we didn't get. And it can also be an interruption or a thwarting of a natural threat response. So these are all things that can come up when we access expanded states. And if we don't have resources to process them, to hold them, the ability to be aware or to decouple the experience itself from the meaning that we have, that can be, very overwhelming. So, this work, it's not about being calmer all the time. It's about making that capacity bigger, being a better surfer, if you will. And this is doubly important for working with psychedelics because inherently in the psychedelic experience, you're going to go outside your comfort zone. You're going to get dysregulated. Something is going to happen that is not what you hope for or what you want. And then, it's not like he can say, I'm sorry, I'd like to stop this right now, right? You're just sort of there. Um, so again, this is like a different, kind of view than I showed in the beginning. But these three types of breath work, awareness, regulation, and transformation. I think that Wim Hof breathing is somewhere right between regulation and transformation. For some people, it's more regulation work, and for others, it can open into a full, expanded state experience. Everyone's a little bit different. But yeah, we're really going to work in this course on expanding our capacity through breath work, so that we can move from this window of tolerance, to what we call the window of welcome, right? Where we're open to what's happening, even if it's not, the most comfortable thing. But building readiness for intensity, right? The more that we practice expanding this capacity, the more that's going to translate into intensity in non-ordinary states. We're also going to, I'm going to lean in, we're talking about intensity, we're talking about capacity. The other side of this coin is the things that I've learned in somatic experiencing, which is all about titration and pendulation, being able to move from the intensity back into safety and knowing how to bring ourselves back into that, having resources so that when stuff starts to feel too intense, we know what to do. We don't just panic and sort of lose the whole plot. Um, and, breath work is a really unique sort of trainer for medicine work because we can back off of the experience and the intensity really easily. So it's not just about being calm, but we want to have tools and resources for working with where we're at in our nervous system state. I'm going to skip over this for the sake of time, but if you're watching the replay, you can come back to it. Um, But yeah, trauma-informed breath work, it's not just about pushing, it's about meeting the nervous system where it's at. And so with titration, taking small, manageable amounts of activation that can help expand capacity. In the breathwork practice we're going to do in a few minutes, it's all about titration. You get to really push as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. And in doing so, become that increase that surfing skill at your own pace. Because the nervous system heals through safety, not through overwhelm. And I think that that truly does translate into the psychedelic experience. When we slow down and we feel relatively safe to be with the experience, um, that's when we really have the room for integration. So, the first course that we're doing is going to be Breathwork for Integration. It's going to start in February. It's going to be an 8-week immersion to explore the breathwork as both path and portal, a way to access expanded states of awareness and the resources that we've been talking about for nervous system and somatic work. And it's going to be a blend of transpersonal psychology. We're going to dive more into those Grofian holotropic principles, as well as the somatic experiencing, which is very modern, to help you experience depth safely and sustainably. So it's really for people that are ready to go beyond kind of the random experiences and have a more embodied relationship with their transformation work itself. So yeah, there's going to be at least 8 sessions, as well as access to the Skool portal. There'll be recordings, and you'll also have access to all the breath work that we're doing outside of that course. So right now we're doing the integrative breath work weekly. We're doing the longer, more transformational sessions at least a couple of times a month. You'll have access to all of those as well as the recordings. And the breathwork for integration is going to be the first of 4 courses over the next year. So this is kind of the lineup that I have planned for 2026. Um, Now it's designed to be modular, meaning like if for people that are coming in 3 months from now or 6 months from now, they can jump into the path of meditation or the somatics and creativity course, depending on where we're at in the calendar, and not feel like, oh, I've completely missed out, I'm completely lost. And they can kind of cycle back through as we go into 2027 and repeat the courses again. The courses are going to be offered on a per course basis or as a year-long journey with, as you can see, a pretty substantial discount. So basically they're $500 per course, or $1,500 for the whole year. And for the next week, we have like a Black Friday, Cyber Monday discount for early adopters. And another thing about the early adopters is if you're not already, a member of Blue Magic Alchemy, as soon as you join, you're going to have access to all the paid content on the site, meaning that you're going to get extra breathwork sessions, even before the course begins. So I will put the link for those in the chat really quickly if I can find it. So this is for the single course. And if you're ready to go for the whole year. And again, these discounts will be active through the rest of the week. So I gave you a lot of information. Um, I feel like I did okay on time. Every time I do workshops, I get a little bit better. But I just want to pause and see if there's any questions about the content itself or about the courses, anything that I can help to clarify before we go into the breathwork practice. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Jonathan. So what day, what time and what day are you going to be doing that first course?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm looking at um, probably a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But I am open, once people start to sign up, if we can put out like a poll and see what's the best day for everyone.
You think it'll be late in the day or more midday or
Yeah, I think it'll be in the evenings,
okay.
like later afternoon or evening. The nice thing is that it's still very early in the planning, so we can make adjustments based on um, who's signing up and um, try to meet the needs of the majority. Yeah, so those are going to be 2 hour sessions. So the sessions will all have a breathwork element, but we'll also have time for sharing, for integration, um, to discuss books or other things. The author of The Power Within is called Tav Sparks. So, within the lineage of holotropic breathwork, holotropic was started by Stan and Christina Grof. And then there was a point in time where Stan decided he didn't want to teach anymore. And he sold the holotropic breathwork intellectual property and the training that went along with it, which is called Grof transpersonal training, to Tav Sparks. So Tav was like Stan's protege. They taught together for many years before Stan sort of went into semi-retirement and sold it to Tav. Um, so I really appreciate Tav as a mentor, even though I never met him in person. My main breathwork teacher right now um, is sort of the protege of Tav. So I really feel like his work has been quite influential to me. And yes, 2 hours afternoon, evening, so that we can accommodate folks on the East Coast and not be too late for them. Yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday, and in February, yes. Cool.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
So I'm familiar with the breathwork for integration, the ongoing sessions that you've been
Hmm.
having.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how the courses are different or similar?
Yeah, thank you. The course is we're going to be able to go into much more detail about different types of breath work. Um, you know, Awareness practices, different styles of breath work for nervous system regulation. And then I think getting into maybe more of the philosophy of the holotropic paradigm and these principles and having more time to like discuss that as far as integration, what that means to us. Um, and integrating the experiences that we may be having, during the breath work or even outside of the course itself. So it'll be much, within kind of that model that I showed. Um, like within this sort of like four step model, we'll go much more in depth into practices for especially this middle section, like the nervous system regulation, um, different types of breath work, how those might, one of the things that I've found is, and it would make it a lot easier to teach, but that different types of breath work affect different people differently. Like there's no one size fits all. So it's really going to be about having some experience with each of these methods and talking about like the physiology and the science behind what's happening with each of them so that you can find what works the best for you. And maybe what's working the best for you right now. Like what was helping me a few years ago and when where my nervous system was at is not the same as what I'm using today. Right. So it's like instead of, you know, I have sort of a bone to pick with a lot of breathwork facilitators right now that, they market something, they sort of like put a package around it, and then they say, like, this is the solution. Whereas if you learn kind of what's happening in the nervous system when you're doing these different types of breathing practices, then you could really go to anyone and say, like, oh, I know what they're doing. Well, we were doing a hold here, or we're, extending this, we're shortening that. And you kind of know what the physiology is. And, I've had multiple times where, I'm leading a breathwork class of more, nervous system based breathwork. And the same technique that um, relaxes the heck out of 90% of the class participants activates the other 10%. Right. So in that case, it's like, how do we adjust? How do we find, what works best for each individual person so that, we're not just saying like, oh no, just do this type of breath work. And, it just doesn't work that as well. Um, than knowing kind of what's going on. And that's where the oxygen advantage comes in, right? So that's something that I know that you're familiar with as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So much more in depth. I think, when we do the breath work for integration groups, um, each week or the practice that we're going to do in a couple of minutes here, um, we really just have time to focus on just the practice. And I think being able to expand that, to add in more nuance, to go more step by step through what might help you and support you in your practice, both within the group and outside of it. Because ultimately, I'm like, I would love for people to continue to take this course, a few times as much as they need. But ultimately, to sort of I don't want people to have to rely on me or this course. I want them to have their own toolkit that they can take with them and have whether they're continuing to work with me or not.
And does this course replace those sessions, or will you still have those other sessions?
No, no, we'll still have those other sessions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your question. Okay, so speaking of which, so integrated breath work, which I know a couple of you have done. Um, but if you're watching the replay as well, this might be new to you. This is one of our breathwork practices that we do every week within the community. And really, the way that I designed it is to mirror the stages of a meta experience in non-ordinary states. So any sort of ritual, any sort of ceremony has three parts to it. Even, if you think about meditation from the Buddhist perspective, there's, you set an intention, there's a preparation, then there's the meditation itself, and then there's a dedication or an integration afterwards. So whenever I've, done ceremony, whether it's cacao or psilocybin or breath work, we always have these three parts. Um, so the titration is going to be built into this experience, meaning that I really invite you to take it at your own pace. The way that I usually sort of explain this when I'm teaching it or guiding groups is in the same way that you go to the gym and you find that edge for yourself with the weight that you're lifting, because the weight that's too light isn't really going to help you out. You're just sort of wasting time, or you're going to have to spend a whole lot more time than you would like to actually feel some sort of benefit. That's not really helpful. And in the same way, the weight that's too heavy is also not really going to be helpful. It's just going to, have a much higher potential of injury, which then would take you out of that reason for going to the gym. Right. So it's really about finding that edge for yourself. Um, for some of us, doing circular breathing doesn't feel super comfortable or super safe. Right. But if you, just like a psychedelic, you can always take more, it's harder to take less. Right. So if you start slow and let it grow, and maybe that's during this session, maybe that's in the next session or when you come back to the replay, um, that's how we start to build that capacity. And it might change, it's not a linear path either. Um, there's days where like, man, I've slept really poorly, or I've got a lot going on, mentally, emotionally. I might not push myself as hard in a breathwork session as I would if otherwise I'm feeling really good and kind of expansive. So again, just kind of finding your own edge with this. Um, because this is sort of an open container, I just want to, mention that there are contraindications. If you do have aneurysms, cardiovascular disease, detached retina, epilepsy, history of strokes or seizures, or are pregnant, I would definitely suggest just staying with the first part of the breath work, which is the preparation and the integration, rather than going through the full circular breathing. Um, and, just caution if there is bipolar or schizophrenia, or if you've been hospitalized anytime recently for psychiatric conditions or emotional crisis. PTSD, this type of breathing can be really great for PTSD. However, kind of user beware as well. For what we're doing today, it's pretty safe for most people. Um, Most of these apply more to the longer, like holotropic sessions. But, ethically, I feel like I should mention. Okay, so our practice today is going to be these three parts. First, do some grounding and some coherence breathing, followed by 4 rounds of connected breath work. Now, with connected breath work, if it feels right, breathe in and out of the mouth a little bit faster and a little bit deeper than you normally do. And think about closing the gaps or the spaces between the inhale and the exhale. Um, so breathing in kind of a circular pattern. Okay. We'll also, each round will have a hold. So we'll hold the breath with the lungs empty for about a minute, and then hold the breath with the lungs full for about 15 seconds. And then after those 4 rounds, just coming back to your natural breath, allowing yourself some time and some space to be with the experience, to integrate whatever has come up in the more active part of the breath work. And I'll play some music through this. I'll guide you through it. So don't worry about remembering all of this. That'll be next. Okay. So yeah, if you want to lay down, you can. If you'd like to sit up, that is also good. Whatever feels right for your practice today. Maybe just take a minute if you need to get set up. Okay, so just like we did at the beginning of the workshop, starting to bring that awareness inward to your breath. And whatever else is here in your sensory experience. Sound, felt sensation. Maybe there's smells. But paying special attention to that connection between you, your body, and the surface below you. Really take a moment to notice, get curious about where do I feel that connection of support the strongest. Even imagining that you're breathing right into that feeling of support. Starting to take slower, deeper breaths in and out of the nose, really feeling the belly expand. You might put a hand on the lower part of the ribs, feeling that diaphragm expand with each breath. And we'll move into a couple minutes of coherence breathing. We're going to do about a 5-second inhale in through the nose, 5-second exhale out through the nose, really focusing on that deep diaphragmatic engagement. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In and out. In and out. In and out. And staying with that breath. And now, if it feels right, shifting that awareness and the breath into the heart space. Imagining glowing lights in the center of the chest. And that the breath is going right into it. Maybe bringing your intention for being here to mind, the curiosity that brought you, or the intention that you have for your practice today. Placing that in the heart space as well. Nourishing it with your breath. Letting the out breath, the exhale, carry away anything that you're ready to let go of. Anything that's no longer serving you and this intention. Thank you for taking the time to slow down to connect to yourself. And we'll start our transition into the second part of the practice. If it feels right, you might shift the breath from in and out of the nose to in and out of the mouth. But even if you feel like staying with the breath through the nose, letting the breath get a little bit deeper, keeping the breath full and deep. Remember, finding your own pace, your own edge, your own depth to this practice. As you begin to close the gaps, the spaces between the inhale and the exhale, so that the breath becomes a continuous circle, always breathing in or breathing out. I'll give you a suggested pace, but again, finding the pace that works for you. So breathing in and out, in and out, fully in, letting go, fully in, letting go, fully in, letting go. Staying with the breath. Once you find that pace that works for you, just stay with it, always breathing in or breathing out. Keep going. It's natural to start noticing some physical shifts. You might feel a little lightheaded. You might notice some tingling in the arms or legs. Just see if you can observe the experience. Just notice what's coming up for you physically, mentally, emotionally. Let yourself be the observer. coming up on our first pause. On your next breath, as you exhale, let go of all the air. Empty the lungs fully. Pausing there when the lungs are empty. Again, just letting yourself notice. About 15 more seconds. And then nice big breath in and hold. And letting go. So that was one whole round. We're going to do 3 more rounds. So coming back to full deep breaths in and out. Coming back to those circular breaths. Slowly in, letting go. Finding that pace that works for you. Stay with it. You're doing great. Keep going. You got this. We're coming up on pause number 2. Next exhale, fully emptying the lungs. Let it all go. Pause there when the lungs are empty. And big breath in and hold. And letting that go as well. All right, we're halfway through. You're doing great. As you come back to those full circular breaths, maybe making adjustments to the circular breath, maybe a little bit slower, maybe a little bit faster. Noticing where you're at, and if you'd like to push a little bit more, or even back off a little bit. Staying with your breath. Keep going. Coming into pause number 3. Full release. Let it all go. Emptying the lungs. And then big breath in and hold. And letting go. All right, last round. Doing great. Coming back to those circular breaths one more time. Stay with it. Stay with it just a little more. We're coming up on our last pause. Full exhale, full release. Let it all go. Pausing here. I am here now with this. When you feel ready to return to your breath, coming back to your natural breath, slowing back down, coming back to breathing in and out of the nose, just allowing yourself to be here. Starting to notice that connection between your body and the surface below you again. Allowing that sensation of support Gently guide you back from the inner experience back into the connection with the outer world. Noticing how your experience may have shifted. What's changed? Where do you feel the most relaxed? So I know we're a little bit over time, and I don't want to rush that coming back experience. Do you want to thank you for taking the time to connect to yourself and to attend this workshop? If you'd like to connect with me further, bluemagicalchemy@gmail.com is the email. I offer online somatic experiencing and breath work, as well as integration coaching. We have our Skool community, skool.com/bluemagicalchemy. And you can also contact me at my website, bluemagicalchemy.com. And of course, podcast is there, a wonderful free resource with other like-minded guests, as well as a lot of solo episodes with guided practices and sharing more about these topics. For those of you on the call, anything that you wanted to share?
Thanks, Jonathan.
Paul, you look like you lost some weight.
Huh.
Yeah,
It's possible.
you're looking good.
Yeah, I feel good. Been pretty busy.
Good. Yeah, I haven't talked to you since the retreat. So
Yeah.